But actually, the thing that I would challenge people on is the definition of success. So what I noticed is that a lot of people have a specific definition of, oh, I am going to be successful when blah blah blah, you know. But actually, it's a lot about what actually do you like to do, how do you feel every single day, and is actually being like seen by others as someone amazing. Is actually that your definition of success? If so, I would reconsider that. So
So, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of My Generation with Ines Podcast, where we challenge perspective and give you a different one. Today, my guest is actually a dear friend that we worked together in the same team before in my ex organization. So, I'm very glad to have her. Today, I have Dafne with me. She's a curious explorer by nature, as she describes herself. Throughout her life, she has lived in 5 different countries and had the opportunity to visit and explore 50 plus of them. In the past 8 years, she facilitated conferences, workshops, and coaching sessions to over 3,000 people from 100 plus countries. She currently helps people and organizations explore their purpose and bring their transformation dreams into reality with the use of different proven methodologies such as human-centered design and experimentation. So today with Dafne Sortorio, we're going to talk about conscious productivity, how to show up and avoid the busyness trap. Daphne, welcome to the show.
thanks. That's a very official introduction. I was like, oh, maybe I should have written like a shorter thing for LinkedIn. But okay, no problems at all.
How do you feel? How do you feel when someone like reads your biography for you?
A lot of
That you
pressure.
have it on LinkedIn.
It's like imposter syndrome just hits, you know, and you're like, oh my God, but it's all good.
Is
So
that really me, right? Yeah, I
yeah,
get it. Do you have it
super
often?
happy to be here.
Thank
Go ahead.
you. Do you have it often now that you mentioned imposter syndrome?
I think so. I think it's less and less often, to be honest. I think now, especially with the whole conscious productivity and the mentoring, when I started this, I was like, okay, who am I to actually mentor people and support them? Because I'm not like a psychologist or anything. So I think a little bit on that angle, but then I think it's something that's been less and less. So
Amazing. Yeah. So for all the listeners, I was mentioning that Daphne and I, we work together in the same organization. And I'm telling you guys that Daphne was one of those, hustlers that all the team looked up to in terms of like productivity and like things to be done and discipline. I think you were one of the most disciplined people I have ever met. Um, Super disciplined, like with the gym, with the workout, with the things organized, and we wanna dive into that today. But would be great if we have like a bit of overview of what have you been doing for the listeners to get to know you more. So you worked in innovation. That's how also in our team back then you were doing network innovation, I remember. And then after that, you worked in innovation again, and now you're doing a lot of things with experimentation design. If you can maybe elaborate on what you're doing right now.
yeah, sure. I think that first thing, I am originally from Brazil, from Rio. I actually had a long experience in the sales aspect, let's say. So I worked with business development for a long time. I joined Isaac, an organization that I think a lot of people might know. I worked at Isaac for more than 7 years. So that's also how we met, of course. And then, well, I did a big career change, let's say from 2016, from 2017. So that's indeed when I moved from kind of like sales and I would say product as well to innovation, and also doing a little bit of product on that. As you know, a lot of things changed on that
Yeah.
year from our side in our team. But then after this, indeed, I worked as an innovation coach, let's say at ING, which is one of the biggest banks in the Benelux. I currently live in Antwerp, Belgium, of course. And then 2 years ago, I joined a company called OneUp. So it's almost 2 years, let's say. And I'm also doing innovation. So I'm basically a consultant for bigger corporates who want to experiment and test out their ideas. So it's not kind of like a usual consultancy job where you go there and you tell people what to do. So my job is really building the businesses and launching them. And that's what I really love about it. I could talk about it for hours, but most
Yeah.
of the projects I've been working on are around sustainability and impact. So they are really exciting ones. And yeah, I think that's it. And then of course on the side, there is a lot about mentoring, conscious productivity, and
Yeah.
at One Up, I'm also leading the innovation, let's say innovation execution department on the company.
Awesome.
That's it.
So, yeah. So, in your journey, I remember you were posting around the productivity and tips and how to get there, etc. But I want to know, like, for you personally, in your own journey, how did that click? So, what was like the root cause of, putting, let's say, a discipline around a certain goal?
Yeah, that's actually a really difficult question because I was trying to remember when it started, and I just cannot remember. I think like the first memory that comes to mind is actually from my childhood. So my mom I mean, I don't have that memory, of course, my mom tells me that, right? So she tells me that I used to come back from school when I was really young, like 6 years, 7 years old, and I would go straight to my bedroom. And then she was like, "Hey, don't you want to kind of like take a shower, do something else?" And I was like, "No, I'm just gonna do my homework because then it's like everything's fresh in my head, and I just want to get this done as soon as possible, and then I'm free to do other things."
That's the
And
dream
she
of
said,
every mother.
it's just like not even like eating. And I was like, "No, it's all here in my head. I need to go." And she said that I'll enter home like with a backpack, not even remove my shoes or anything and just go like, and and this is really me. And I was like, "Oh wow, that sounds very familiar." But I think so. I think for me, it's like I was also kind of like raised in this culture of get things done. My mother, my grandmother, everyone, they are really entrepreneurial. And I think I was raised in this kind of culture of just shut up and do it, being very honest. And I think discipline, of course, falls into that. One thing that I noticed is that in 2016, yeah, 2017 is actually when it clicked to me the difference between productivity and conscious productivity, let's say.
Hmm.
So what I noticed is that I would get really burned out by trying to do a lot of things because I
Yeah.
am a really curious person, as you know, and I think as are you as well. You are also the type of person who likes to explore and learn different things. And I noticed that a lot of times I would just get super exhausted and burned out because I was just trying to do everything and say yes to everyone all the
Mm,
time.
yeah.
Yeah. So then I think my key problem was not that I would let's say not deliver things. I think I always delivered quite well, but then I would get burned out and exhausted, and then it would be kind of like a loss for myself. So yeah, and then I think what I noticed is that saying more yes to myself and more no to other people, and then focusing
Mm,
on what's really important for me. That's really when the click happened, and I started
yeah.
searching more about it.
So talking more about this click, because something might happen that made you realize, oh, there were certain misconceptions that I had around productivity, and this is not the way it should be done. Was it like work-life balance? Was it? I mean, you talked about the burnout, but you still do a lot of things. So do you still feel that maybe your energy is a bit scattered all over the place, or how was the differentiation? So let's start, for example,
Mhm.
with what's the difference between productivity and conscious productivity?
Yeah, I think productivity, well, how people might think or the misconception of it, of course, is more like getting, well, a lot of input to actually have a lot of output, or maybe even having less input to have more output, so have more results. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times what I notice is that why are we really doing that? So it's really about questioning why. And then, for example, a lot of times it will be things that are not even important to yourself, but for others, right? And I think in that year, the click that was there for me is that, for example, I wouldn't need to do everything that people were asking me to do or go to all the events that people would expect me to go, for example, in the
Mm,
social life. So there was also a lot of on not on work
yeah.
because that didn't give me energy. And then I think conscious productivity is about kind of like self-respect, let's say,
Mm,
and knowing what's a priority for you. And of course, that's a journey, right? And we always fall back on the trap of like getting hustling and so on. So it's also, I would say, kind of like a mindset that you try to live on, but it's not like you're perfect all the time. I
mm-hmm.
think that I'm not sure it was clear, but
Yeah. Yeah. We can get clearer into that. So, for example, if there is this opportunity that comes your way, right? And how what is your thought process to really think, okay, this is something that worth spending my energy? And maybe sometimes you do go through that process and you realize that yes, this is worth my energy, and then halfway you realize that it's not. So how do you first have that thought process to say yes at the beginning, and then how do you have the thought process to maybe say, oh no, this is actually not it, when you are already halfway through, for example?
Yeah, I think the second one is harder, but maybe let's start with the
Mm.
first one.
Yeah, for sure.
uh, yeah. So I think there are two things that I learned. So the first one is also one of the tips that I can give to people is that if you really do a lot of work on knowing yourself and you observe how you react to certain situations, you will already understand that you have some tendencies, right? So I know that I have a tendency to jump to anything that people ask me and say yes. I know that's me, my people pleaser side of myself, you know.
Mhm.
So what I know is that there is this kind of like energy, I don't even know how to explain, that I feel that gets like very excited to say yes. And what I learned is to take a step back and say, hey, let me think about it, and I'm going to give you an answer by blah blah time. Of course sometimes it's really urgent and then you have to say, okay, of course I'm going to get it done now. But I just learned to kind of like put a dog in a leash. I don't know if that's, you know, something like just hold on for a bit.
Yeah.
And then if I notice that I'm really like chaotic in my mind, I usually go for a walk. And then I try to assess
Mm.
kind of like my feelings on that, and then come back and say, hey, actually, I thought about this, and this is how I propose. Most of the times, nobody will die if you wait a couple of hours, you know, to say yes or no, and actually you'll be
Yeah.
more respected for that. I think that's a good thing. So this is one. And then there's
Okay.
a second one, which is about kind of like a technique that I learned that's more of a meditation one, let's say, which is really about thinking about former experiences where you had like a clear yes, a clear no, and a not so clear, you know, no, let's say.
Hmm.
And kind of like noticing how you feel, how your body reacts, how your breath, you know, becomes, and so on. And then trying to take a picture of that, and then assessing in those situations when you say yes or no, if that's the moment. So is that a definite yes, is that a definite no? And you will know, most of the times you know
Mm.
that it's a no.
That's an interesting one, because yeah, it's really interesting. Like, if, because I never really had the opportunity, like this is the first time I hear like, okay, well, if I think right now of my own experience and I would try to remember when I said, like, the fuck yeah, then it's, yeah, and I can list, how I felt, how it was. But what about the things that we should do but they don't feel very exciting, but we have to do, and then when your discipline have to come? So for example, someone have
Hmm.
to go to the gym, and it's not a fuck yeah, I want to go to the gym, so so
That's for sure.
so how do you do about the things that require that discipline, that level of discipline, and they are good for you, and it's like a self-care for your future self, but they might not feel that exciting, maybe? How do you do about
Yeah,
that?
I think the first question I would ask is indeed, is that fuck yeah in the long term, at least for you? Then if
Yeah.
it is, then okay, we have a good start, right? Because what I do feel as well is that a lot of times people, they want to go to the gym, for example, just because other people are going to the gym, and they think maybe that's a nice thing to do, but they don't really feel it, how this could actually help them, right? It's more of
Mm,
a peer pressure, society
okay.
pressure thing, let's say. And then I think this is the first thing. Then you get, you know, like kind of like you get rid of that kind of like why.
Yeah.
And then I think the second thing is really like, how can you create some triggers for yourself on the moment? I think there are a couple of things, of course, having clear priorities. And for me, it's really, so I'm going to give you an example. Of course, there will be, not every day you will be excited to go to the gym, and maybe you'll not do a full workout, but can you at least have kind of like a shitty day workout? So it's like, okay, I'm gonna get there and I'm gonna do 5 minutes and that's it, you know. And then if I want, I'm gonna leave, but I did, at least I did that. So
I
I
showed
think
up.
just this kind of, yeah, you know, just showing up, and it doesn't mean that you have to do the full on thing. So today is an example. I was really feeling super bad in the morning. I went, I don't know how I got there. It's like I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm here today. but then I didn't do the best workout of my life. It was not the best one, but I mean, I did it, right?
You
That's the most
showed up.
important
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I
And the same with
remember.
meditation. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. I remember once I was actually having a very bad day. It was very low moment, but then I was like putting on the clothes. Literally, it was very bad. But yeah, and then you feel good, like because I don't know, you just showed up. Yeah,
And why did you do it when you actually had the situation?
because I knew I would feel better when I'm done with that. It was a bad day, so at least I do that one thing for myself. um so going back to my question, so you said in order to know at the beginning if you should go for an opportunity and if it's going to be conscious productivity, you would observe yourself, give yourself time, and then answer, or try to remember how you felt when it was super duper yes. What about halfway through and you realize this is wasting my energy and this is not conscious productive, let's say? So you say this is part is harder. How do you do about that?
Yeah, it's harder because sometimes you can just not get away from it, right? And you just have to finish it. So I think that's also the discipline aspect that you said, okay, I put myself in this mess, so I'm going to finish it, but what can I learn next time, right? Because what I notice is that people also tend to say, oh yeah, I'm never going to do this again, but then the same situation happens and then they didn't stop to think about it, and then they do the same thing, they say yes again, when this comes up. So that's the most important thing. But I think there are ways to actually say no after you've said yes. So you can say, hey, actually I was working on this, or I thought about this and I don't think that makes sense. Here's why. And then list the reasons why this doesn't make sense. So try to prove a case. Of course, if this is for a boss or someone that you really have to report into, you need to kind of be smart, right? You cannot just be emotional and say, I just don't feel like doing it. No, come on, just why is that? Well, because maybe it's just that the task is not relevant enough for a project, for example, or maybe it's not relevant for you, right? So I think this is one. And then the second thing is also potentially just being honest and saying, hey, when I said yes, I thought I could manage, but I cannot. Apologies. How can we actually make it happen? Moving on. How can we split the task? How can we delegate to someone? So it requires humility, and I wouldn't recommend to do it all the time. But I think if you do it once, it's okay, right?
Yeah. I think also it's one of the things that you mentioned, that it's about also a lot knowing yourself. And you do also, even in your blog, you publish around the end of the year reflections and how you do quarter reviews. And I think that's very important because, for example, this year it happened for me that I dropped a certain personal project that was very dear to me, but I had to drop it because I realized this is wasting energy and it's not the right time. And it was hard. It was really hard. Because, when something you're passionate about and you spend a lot of hours and, literally a lot of discipline was there, but then I said, okay, this is not the right time, and I felt it was scattered, so I had to let go, but it felt the right thing, right? So how do you, is there like a certain maybe practical tips or maybe guide? I mean, I know these things like needs a lot of inner work, but how do you navigate that?
You mean in terms of dropping things, or
yes, or knowing yourself more in what you can take on and what you have to say no to? When you go ahead and think, what kind of questions you ask yourself? You said like why, but what else you can ask yourself? I don't know, how do you do it?
I think there's a really cool, by the way, I just wanted to say good job on dropping the things. I'm very curious to hear more about those. I think it's very difficult, right, to do that. And maybe I just quickly want to come back to that because I wanted to give an example, and I had the same thing. So I was supposed to launch my, actually the second round of my program now in November. So that's beginning of the month. But then I had Dutch classes at night. There is a lot happening at my job. And I was also convoked by the Belgian government to take this kind of like social integration course because I've been living here for 6 years now. And they're like, yeah, it's time for you to kind of like officially complete this course. Yeah, integrate to society. and you cannot say no. Basically, you have to pay a fine, and it's like it's really crazy. And I was like, yeah. So then I said, okay, I don't have any evenings free. The Instagram thing was really suffocating me, like the thing of like
Mm,
having to post all the time. And I really had to make a decision, and I had to come back and say, hey, I have to drop this now. It's either this or my health. That's
mm.
it. And then it felt good after. I mean, the during didn't feel good, but after 1 week, I was like, oh, actually, I feel way better. So I think this was the right decision. So yeah, I think sometimes you have to do hard things. I think it's
Yeah,
similar to you, right? To your
yeah,
project, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting. Um, so
But I can call back to the other question as well. But I don't know if you have anything else to ask on this one.
yeah, yeah. So I'm more curious around like what for someone who's like listening right now and getting to know the concept of conscious productivity for the very first time. What would be like some practical tips to start, navigating this concept or certain habits, let's say, to practice? Let's start like with the small things, when you build the wall brick by brick. So how do you? What would be your recommendations to start?
Yeah, I think it was really good, the question that you asked before, indeed. So first, before knowing, I mean, what your priorities are, you need to understand yourself, right? So I think there is a very clear tool that you can use for that. It's called the 30-day challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did, and I sometimes do, and I also do with my mentees, is that I ask people to just go do a journal for 30 days
Okay.
around. So you just basically, of course, run your day. There are two variations, but I'll go with the simple one. So you finish the day and you ask, first of all, what gave me energy today?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Second of all, what drained me energy today? And the third one is, what did I learn today? So one thing that I learned,
Mm-hmm.
very simple. And then you do that for 30 days. You can do it for more. And then usually by the end of the 30 days, when you go and you look back, you see the patterns and you see like, oh my God, these are the
Mm-hmm.
clear things that give me energy. These are clearly things that drain me energy. And then based on that, how can I adjust my life to kind of like get rid of the training ones,
Yeah.
or at least make it a little bit more bearable, right? Because sometimes you have to do those things. And I think this is a good start, because based on that, you can say, oh, priority wise, these are things that definitely need to stay, let's say,
Yeah.
in my routine, in my daily life. And then I think based on that, I always tell people to kind of like list the most important things and try to build a sort of a MVP, right? A minimum viable product of your own routine and how that would work,
Yeah.
and try it out. And then say, okay, this is how I'm going to try, and then just iterate on the goal.
Yeah.
That's the simplest way.
Yeah. And it can be like simple because like for a lot of people, when you say journal, they be like, oh, I cannot like carry a book or whatever, but you can literally put this on the notes of your phone.
Yes, you
Yeah.
can do it anyway,
Yeah.
any way you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So doing this journal, what gave me energy, what drained me, and what did I learn for 30 days? That can be a practical tip. Any other things that you think can accelerate, let's say, their journey for a productivity that is conscious?
Yeah, I think for sure there is one thing. I even wrote it down. So there is this life-changing trick, but I think like first of all, I think the life-changing trick is understanding your triggers. So
Mm-hmm.
just observe the situations that you put yourself into and say like, okay, I said yes to this and now I really want to run away. I think it's really important to kind of like take some time to think about those and then understand your triggers, right? So as I said, my trigger is to jump into yes and say yes to people.
Mm-hmm.
And then based on this, I have some prompt questions as well that you can use throughout the day. I literally have three post-its on in front of my computer.
Okay.
So one of them is, what is the 20% of the work that is going to lead me to the 80% of the results?
Mm-hmm.
So this is something for you to kind of like, okay, is this part of my 20%? Like, is this the thing that's really going to make me, get a lot of results? So for example, answering an email, is that really the most important thing right now? Or should I
Mm-hmm.
actually focus on another project, something like that? And then the second question is this actually the uh, 20% of the tasks or the people or whatever that are driving me the 80% of the headache, let's say, right? So there, I don't know if there's always I think something. I think, does
Yeah.
anything come to mind? Yes.
Yeah, I'm laughing because so the boss of my boss, she has this book, notebook. It's called People I Want to Punch. So it's basically, it has like on the cover, like the notebook, it has on the cover people I want to punch. So like when you say 80% of the people putting me the headache, that's what I correlated to.
Okay, maybe you shouldn't punch those people, but you can at least kind of say, okay, this.
Yeah. So
Yeah, maybe
you
like that.
drop those things, right?
Yeah, either you drop them or you see, okay, I'm just gonna put them in kind
Yeah.
of like more automatic mode. So actually this is a tip from Tim Ferriss, which I really
Mm,
recommend. I think a lot of people know him, but if you
yeah.
don't, just
Yeah.
really like it's really like his podcast is amazing. And this is part of the 4 Hour Work Week book,
Big book, yeah.
which, have you read it? Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, because one of the things I checked in that book was around the what time do you answer? Your emails, because when you said about the emails, I remember that because for example, I work with that, so I don't check my emails in the morning when I start working. I don't do that. I start
That's a nice
working my tasks and then I check my emails. So yeah, if my colleagues are listening, this is why I don't answer you in the first thing in the morning.
You should also make a note, right? Tim Ferriss tells you to kind of like put a automatic reply or something and just educate people that you don't do that. But maybe let's get to that. But he also gives that example. But what he says is that, well, he had his own business, right?
Mhm.
And what he noticed when he did a very kind of like in-depth analysis is that 80% of the results, kind of like the money that he was getting, were coming from 20% of the clients. And then there was always also this 20% of clients that were not giving him anything, but
Yeah.
were generating him so much headache. And then he said, you know what, you don't give me any money, I'm just going to let you go. And he said that actually with one of them, what he did was just to put at automatic kind of like account management. So he said, hey, this is what I can offer you. If you want, take it or leave it. And they remained. But all the work, because they were all the time emailing like, hey, I don't like this, I don't like that, just finished. So
Yeah.
I think it's a nice thing to think about. So this is kind of like the second post-it, right?
Okay.
And then there's the last one, which is really good for when the days where you're procrastinating and you're pretending that you're doing something really important.
Yeah. I'm
Which
getting
is
into that soon.
this is the best one. It's like, am I being active uh, and achieving things, or am I being productive and achieving things, or am I just being active and doing anything just to pretend that I'm working, basically?
Mhm.
So I can share you the right question later, but it's something like that. So basically,
Mhm.
is it like, am I here sitting in front of my computer cleaning up my emails just to say I'm sitting here, or
Yeah.
am I really focused on a task? And I think a lot of times I notice that I'm kind of like inventing things to do,
Mm.
something like that, instead of doing the things that are important. Yeah, that's the thing that he said. Sorry. So it's like, am I doing the right thing, or am I inventing things to run away from the actually important things that I don't want to be doing?
Yeah.
That's the question.
That's
Yeah.
super and right? You know when you are faking it and lying to yourself. And you are inventing, right? Like it. I think deep down we all know it. We're just like go with it because
It's fun,
it's
right? Yeah. You feel super productive, right? You're like, this slide needs more work. And then you're kind of like moving the slide back and forth, inventing. It's like, this is not needed. Come
So
on.
about procrastination, this is a truth or dare questions kind of thing. So because I do this sometimes and I catch myself when I do it. Like sometimes like when I have this to-do list, very important, and then I don't finish it all, but then I did other things that were not in the to-do list. I would write them and tick them. I was like, I did this just to give myself that dopamine. But they were not in the initial and this is I think where I am inventing things to do to feel like productive. So because you
But were those things
Mhm.
important? Like the things that you add, for example, what kind of things are those?
Yeah, it's like that presentation or not really important. That's what I'm saying. Like this is where I catch myself and I'm like, this is where I am inventing things.
Yeah.
um okay, so I wanted to yeah, exactly, because you already mentioned it at the end. That was like my next question around procrastination. Like we do have those days. I don't want to call them a bad day, whether bad or good, who knows. But those days, let's say when you feel low on energy, similar to the the gym example that we had, when you feel low on energy, but you have to do it. But when it comes to work and like getting things done, sometimes it's harder. Um, are there any certain practices you do to go through with that and start feeling like you can go ahead with that big task and do it?
Yeah, I think there are two answers also to that question. I think the first one is it really needed for you to face the day totally today, one of the things that I learned over time is also my job also allows me to do that, is that if I'm having a day where I'm really not feeling productive at all, I'll just call it a day and I'll not work. I'll do something else. And it's
Yeah.
fine. And I have the freedom at my job to actually tell people that, to say, hey, you know what? Today is a bad day. It's fine. Tomorrow I can work some extra hours, So my work nowadays is really driven by output. So then I don't need to kind of like count every single hour I work as long as I'm doing
Yeah,
my job.
that's nice.
So I think it's important for you to kind of think about that. I think most jobs would have that flexibility. Maybe you don't have to be that honest and you have to kind of hide it a bit, But especially with working from home, I think you can manage your own time. So first, if you feel like you need the time, take the morning, go do something that you really like. So, for example, I go for a walk or I try to kind of like energize myself. I always say that if you sit and binge on Netflix, that's usually not the best thing to do. Of course, you
Yeah,
can do that, but I just would say don't only do that, because this is not going to help you
yeah,
like long term. Eat healthy, something healthy for you to kind of like, if you feel really I'm getting sick, then just really try to also kind of like nourish your body, because then you feel like fresh or something
yeah,
like that. And then I think the second thing to push through and you say, no, today, let's say I feel very bad, but it's like a workshop day with my client, or I have this big deadline and I cannot run away from this right
yeah,
now. I think a quick morning routine of kind of like going for a walk, doing a quick meditation, it can be 1 minute. It doesn't need to be longer than that. Writing down things you're grateful for. And also, one question that also really helps me is more like, what is going to make today great? And then really like thinking about one thing that you want to get done, just one, and
yeah,
then try to stick to that one.
yeah. What I was doing recently um, was also like from a podcast I listened to, and there was I forgot her name, the one who invented the 5 second rule, Robinson.
Mel Robbins.
Men's
Mel Robbins.
Robinson. Yeah, she had this like new book is about like a 5 seconds high five. So like you high five yourself in the mirror in the morning, and you're
Did you
like,
do it?
yeah, like I did it for like a consecutive amount of days, especially in the last month, the last especially 2 weeks, because I had like a lot of things to deliver, etc. So that kind of helped. It doesn't have to be meditation, or maybe sometimes depends on the
The
people. Like
high five is a nice
one is
one.
different. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
it can be anything, right? You can dance, you can, I mean, sing, whatever you feel like. I know you really like music, for example, so maybe that energizes you, right? So it can
yeah.
be anything, really. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that is super interesting that now I didn't have it before when I was like planning the episode with you, but now that you mentioned it, because everything is interconnected, because you also had such an amazing, journey of your own health and how you're paying attention to your gut health and fitness, etc. So, you know, everything is interconnected on your mood, on your productivity, and maybe you can give a testimonial of that, like um how did that really affect your productivity, let's say?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one, because sometimes people ask me like, oh, how do you do so many things? You go to the gym, you eat healthy. And I'm like, yeah, but I think I do that many things because I do those things, if that makes any sense. Like,
Hmm.
because I feel like eating healthy really makes me like, for example, when you have a healthy lunch or something, you don't have that big dip of energy after lunch, then you're more productive, or when you exercise, then you feel more energized. So I think it's really, of course, it's not about just eating salad. I really don't believe in that. I think everyone can have bread and whatever. I mean, if you're not intolerant, of course. of course, but and be happy. So I think it's more about kind of like looking for things that nourish your body. That's
Yeah.
it. And exercising is very important. It doesn't matter. It can be anything. It can be walking, dancing, CrossFit, whatever you want to do. I don't think it's kind of like you have to go to
Moving.
the gym.
Yeah,
Yeah,
moving your
just moving
body.
your body. Exactly. We as human beings were made to move. So I think that's
Yeah.
this thing, right? That we forget about this sometimes.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think this one, yeah.
And there are a lot of like recent articles as well about like gut and brain microbiome bacteria, super interesting things, like oh my god, like and you have to really pay attention to that. That's was amazing. Thank you a lot, Daphne. One of the questions that I ask to my guests always at the end is, if there was like one perspective that you want to challenge people around, what would that be? That one perspective.
Hmm. But actually, the thing that I would challenge people on is the definition of success. So what I noticed is that a lot of people have a specific definition of, oh, I am going to be successful when blah blah blah, you
Mm,
know. But actually, it's a lot about what actually do you like to do, how do you feel every single day, and
yeah.
is actually being like seen by others as someone amazing. Is actually that your definition of success? If so, I would reconsider that. So yeah,
That's an
I think this
interesting
is it.
answer. And I don't know, I have the feeling that you've been through like a journey of questioning that, right? Am I right? Or
I think so. I think actually that was how I was raised, let's say,
mm,
from my core. But then I think since like many years ago, this just didn't serve me anymore. And then I noticed that kind of like shining for others doesn't mean anything, you know, because then in the end you're kind of betraying who you are.
mm,
And most of the times to achieve something in life, you actually have to go against what people, not against, but kind of like to change perspectives, you need to not please people, and that's
yeah,
really difficult,
it
and
is.
I've been learning a lot of that. Yeah, but then it becomes
Yeah.
exciting because you get used to it. So
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get you. I get you. And it feels good, you know, slowly when you do it. It feels super hard at the beginning, but then slowly it's like you're back home to yourself somehow, or I don't know how to explain it.
yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly it.
Yeah. Great. Thanks a lot, Daphne. It was definitely sweet and concise, and a lot of insights talking to you. And thanks a lot for the tips, because I think one of the things that, um, I mean, people who listen to this podcast are our generation, basically. So practical tips and like how to do it step by step is one of the important things that I would like to convey there. And you really gave that. So thanks a lot.
No
And
worries, and let me know if any questions come up or if there's anything else you want to know. I'm happy to share some more resources,
awesome. Thanks.
and hope to see you soon in Germany.
Oh, yeah. Or in Belgium.
Yes, that as well.